pathetically. Gonna rise up, throw down my ace in the hole. Such is the way of the world, you can never know just where to put all your faith and how will it grow.
The significance of the cherry blossom tree in Japanese culture goes back hundreds of years. In their country, the cherry blossom represents the fragility and the beauty of life. It's a reminder that life is almost overwhelmingly beautiful, but that it is also tragically short. Welcome to First Unitarian Church. I am your worship associate today, Nellie Chenoweth, and now we're going to have our story for all ages with Kate Wigg, the wonderful, lovely Kate Wigg.
All right, now. Good morning. Can all the young and young at heart come on down? Hi, guys. It's good to see you. Hi, Wrigley. Good morning, guys. So today we're going to hear a story. Come on, young at heart. Get down here. We're going to hear a story from J.K. Rowling, who wrote a few books you might have heard of. Has anyone read or heard of Harry Potter series at all? No? Okay, so a couple people. Yeah, Harry Potter, yes. So this one, the story is a little bit scarier than some of her stuff, honestly. But it talks about death. I saw some eyes pop up. And you've seen some of the movies of Harry Potter, and this is in the movie too. You've seen all of them, so you've seen this story before then. So this one was a little bit hard for me to even tell. I kind of was like, I don't know, do I even want to tell it? It makes me a little afraid. But I realized that that's kind of part of the problem, is that we don't talk about it, right? So I'm going to tell this story from J.K. Rowling. So there were 3 brothers, and they were going to cross a river. And this is a river where a lot of people would get hurt when they tried to cross it. But these 3 brothers were wizards, so some river was no problem for them. They used their wands, they used their magic, they made a bridge. It was going to be really easy to cross. Well, at the other end of the bridge, they met Death, the person. Yeah, that's what my face did too. And Death said, wait a minute, nobody gets to just cross this. But I suppose you're kind of a big deal. You used your wands and your magic. So I'm going to give you each a little gift, because he wanted to kind of see what was really inside them. He said, I'll give you a gift of anything you choose. So the first brother was a little bit kind of power hungry, and he was a little cocky, and he went up and he said, I want a wand that will beat all other wands. I am going to be the greatest wizard in the world. And Death said, okay. And he gave him an elder wand with special magical powers, and he handed that off to him. And the second brother said, I want to conquer death. I want to bring back anyone I've ever met who has died, and I want you to give me the power to do that. And Death said, okay. And he took a stone from the bottom of the lake, and he gave it special powers, and he handed it to the second brother. And the second brother said, I mean, I don't really need anything, but I don't want to worry about death all the time. So I just want maybe a way to not be seen by you all the time. I don't need to be special. I just kind of want to go through my life. And so Death gave him a special cloak that he could wear that made him invisible. Well, it turned out each of these choices had consequences because the first brother went to a tavern. He went to like a hotel, and he started bragging about how great he was and about how he could beat any wizard in the world. And he took out his magical wand, and he even had a battle with another wizard, and he killed that other wizard to show how powerful he was. Well, now nobody really wanted to be around him because he was kind of awful, and someone stole the wand from him. And now he was no longer the most powerful and was even able to be hurt himself. The second brother went home, and he wanted to call back people that he was missing, that had died. And he did, but they couldn't leave his house. And he spent his whole life just waiting and talking with people from the past and not living anymore in the future or meeting anybody new. And eventually that was too hard on him. But the youngest brother lived a really long life, and he had his cloak, and he had children, and he made friends, and he went to work, and he had dinner with his family, and he did all the things that you do. And finally, when he was very, very old, he took off the cloak, and he gave it to his son to show him how to live a long life. And he actually called Death. He said, "I've had a great life. Dude, come pick me up. We'll hang out together." And Death came, and they went away as friends. And so I think what this story is telling us is that if we spend our whole life worrying about death or living in the past or trying to be the greatest of all people, we don't really have much to live for. But if instead we focus on our friends and our family and hanging out and being together, then whatever life we have is going to be amazing. So your job this week is to be as laughing as possible, to tell as many jokes, to help out your family, and give all the hugs you can possibly give. I see you rolling your eyes. Hugs, they're happening. All right? Does that sound doable? All right, here we go again is what I just heard from here. She wants us to like our parents. All right, shall we light the chalice? Come on up. Please stand in body or in spirit for the lighting of our chalice. At times, our own life goes out. Reagan, can you pull that down for me? Each one of us has cause to make deep gratitude. Those who have life.
Good morning again. I'm still Nellie Chenoweth, your worship associate. Quite a few announcements, so I'll just go ahead and let you go through those at your will. I'll just point out a couple things. After service today, we've got coffee hour. If you're new or a visitor, take a blue mug. Let us know that you're open to conversation, and we'll talk to your feet rather than just our own. Well, good morning again, Reagan Leaf. Such a sweetie. And she didn't burn us down. Pink sheets at the end of the pews. There's a little clipboard, so if you would please sign in those, we can let us know kind of who's missing, who's not, who might need us to reach out and, say, hey, checking up on you. The green tags are our hospitality team. That's the Friendly Faces hospitality team this morning. And if you have any questions, need to know where to go, where the restroom is, where the coffee is, they can direct you to where to go. I'll just let you guys go ahead. I know that Carolyn, with her wonderful hat back there, had passed out these pink sheets. And I guess we have a hat happening class happening later this next week. Yes, Joe? Uh-oh. Oh, wine voucher. Yeah, after service stand, after coffee hour stand. All right. We'll now have our offering today. The Share the Plate beneficiary for the month of August, today, that will be the Sienna Francis House. And as always, our Change for Change beneficiary is the Neighborhood Ministry Team. Our first reading today is from Aaron Freeman. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy so they'll understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you hope you would hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell him that all the photons that ever bounced off your face are all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair. Hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much all of our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with their programs as he says it. And he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should have no faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound and that they'll be comforted to know your energy is still around. According to the law of conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly. Amen. We'll have a moment of silence. Okay, before I continue with my next reading, I've got to say, I believe our singing bowl came from Ben and Maria Wallace. Thanks, Ben and Maria. This is awesome. I'm in love. The next reading is Appointment in Sumatra. There was a merchant in Baghdad who sent his servant to market to buy provisions, and in a little while the servant came back, white and trembling, and said, "Master, just now, when I was in the marketplace, I was jostled by a woman in the crowd, and when I turned and I saw that it was death that jostled me. She looked at me and she made a threatening gesture. 'Lend me your horse, and I will ride away from this city and avoid my fate. I will go to Sumatra, and there death will not find me.' The merchant lent him his horse, and he mounted it, and as fast as the horse could gallop, he went. Then the merchant went down to the marketplace. He saw me standing in the crowd, and he came to me and said, 'Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant when you saw him this morning?' 'That was not a threatening gesture,' I said. 'It was only a start of surprise. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad, for I have an appointment with him tonight in Sumatra.'"
instead of saying all of your goodbyes. Let them know you realize that life goes fast. It's hard to make the good things last. You realize the sun don't go down. It's just an illusion caused by the world spinning round.
Stan, thank you. That was just a beautiful selection for the morning. Good morning. My name is Megan Gustafson. I would like to thank the Worship Arts team for inviting me to speak this summer. The hospitality team likely told you as you were coming in, but a little later on in the sermon, I am going to ask you to take out your phones and the devices and refer to the website link that is printed in your order of service right under the title of the sermon, and pull that up, and we're going to watch a little video. It may seem odd to us now, but there was a time, not all that long ago, when dying was simply a common part of everyday living. From the dangers of the natural world to illness and old age, someone close to us was on the edge of death all the time. We saw this, we knew this, we understood this. And then in the early years of the 20th century, some terrible and some wonderful things happened. World War I saw the demise of most of a generation of promising young men. Less here in America than in Europe, but devastating nonetheless. Most of these young men were interred in the ground where they fell instead of being sent home for burial. The pandemic, known at the time as Spanish flu of 1918 and 1919, visited the same sort of disaster on the civilian population that battle had inflicted on the soldiers. Conservative estimates say that 50 million people died worldwide as a result of the war and pandemic combined. It was just too much dying for the world to absorb. On the other side of the coin, technology and battlefield necessity were leading to serious advances in medical treatment. As a result, shortly after the dual tragedies of war and pandemic, people started sending their ill and dying to hospitals instead of caring for them at home. Doctors in white coats and sterile halls with antibiotics and x-rays quickly replaced rural midwives and village doctors that visited patients in their homes. Where once families had done their birthing and dying in the family home, those very natural life events became something mysterious, sanitized, not to be discussed in polite company. And in this transition, death became the enemy. Now, I personally was very fortunate. The first time I lost a beloved family member, I was young yet, and shielded from all the practical details of hospitals and funerals. The second time I lost someone close, I was away at college and in the middle of finals, so I missed not only the particulars, but the funeral itself. When I was introduced to the intricacies of setting a loved one's final affairs, it was not my loved one. See, I was dating this guy, and he had just started thinking we were getting serious enough that he'd like to find a time to take me to the nursing home to meet his grandparents. And suddenly, Grandma Doris was gone. And I met all of my future in-laws at the church the day of her funeral. It was a really eye-opening day for me. I had never known that the family had to decide where to send all of the funeral flowers, or that they had to send thank you cards to everyone that sent flowers or cards or notes. Had no idea that the family took the death certificate away from the funeral with them. These things aren't struggles so much because they're difficult, but because no one talks about it. Each of us has to find our own way through these things instead of getting lessons along the way. We have to find a way back to the days where death was simply part of living. And I have 3 ideas to share with you that I believe will help us do that. While Grandma Doris was ill, Grandpa John moved in the nursing home to be with her. I think at the start he intended to go back to the farm once she was gone. Statistics show that in couples who have been married more than 50 years, when the first spouse dies, the second rarely lives more than a year. John ended up surprising us. He lived another 3 years after Doris died. But it was just after our wedding that John made the difficult decision to deal with their belongings and sell their home. Talk about another eye-opening endeavor. You see, Grandma Doris had kept every single greeting card that any person had ever sent her for any occasion for the entire 50 years that they lived in that house. One upstairs bedroom was stacked floor to ceiling with empty egg cartons, Cool Whip bowls, and mayonnaise jars. In the deep freeze in the cellar, there was meat dated from the Carter administration. The situation at the home farm had been repeatedly compounded by earlier deaths in the family. Uncle Richard had died, and rather than sort through or curate his belongings, everything just stacked into the cellar. Great-Grandma Celia died, and all of her stuff just moved right in. And while some of this can be attributed to the lingering influence of living through the Great Depression, I believe the greater issue in play is that we, as 20th and 21st century humans, tend to believe that there will always be another tomorrow in which all of our collected things will become useful. We think there's all the time in the world left to sort through, organize, or dispose of our stuff. And so we never manage to deal with all of those items we have acquired in our lives. We leave it as a burden for those who have come behind us. Clearing out John and Doris's home farm turned out to be fairly easy in spite of the vast amount of belongings. The family members were mostly on the same page. Everyone had known the auctioneer most of their lives, and all were quite content to leave the heavy lifting in professional hands. Even though my own grandparents had not participated in the same level of hoarding, settling their estate was more stressful by far. All of the cracks in the family dynamic started to show as their children struggled with it. No one really wanted the responsibility, but anytime one sibling took some initiative, another sibling would argue, "You don't have the right to make that decision." If my grandparents had been more realistic about their own mortality, they might have looked around them and seen the potential for difficulty and conflict that would be left in dealing with their belongings. My own mother took this very much to heart and has explicitly told me not to give her as a gift anything that I don't want to take back in 20-some-odd years. So this is my first recommendation about how to bring death and dying back into our everyday lives. Deal with your own stuff while you have the time, energy, and decent health to do it. Minimalism and Japanese decluttering are big trends right now, and very useful ones at that. But I would like to commend to you Margareta Magnusson's book, The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. Many of the concepts are similar. Categorize your belongings and sort through one category at a time. Keep what makes you happy or serves a purpose in your life. But the focus is vastly different. Magnusson encourages us to consider not only what the object means in our own lives, but what it might mean and how it might burden someone else after our death. If you want to pass on a family heirloom, consider doing it now, when you can tell the person you're giving it to the stories behind it, and then enjoy watching them start to make new memories of their own. If you choose to approach death cleaning, remember the golden rule. You can't take it with you. You will move out to the trash, the jumble house, the auction shop, a lot more than you pass on. Try not to impose your stuff on your loved ones. Ask before you make a decision what or if your loved ones might want to have. My grandmother decided that I should get her mink stole and pillbox cap because I lived in the coldest climate. Your memories associated with an item might not be shared. My mom had a very hard time with this. There are items in her parents' home that she truly didn't have any desire to keep, but she couldn't see them simply sent away because they had meant so much to her mother. If my grandmother had managed more of her own death cleaning, my mom wouldn't have extra clutter around her house now. In a reversal, my sister-in-law did not want to see Grandma Doris's yellow cabbage rose china sold. She didn't want it, not at all, but there were so many happy memories of shared family dinners that she didn't want to see it go. So it sits in a box in her basement instead of being able to move on and create happy memories for new family dinners. As part of death cleaning, we are working for ourselves and our loved ones to separate psyche from stuff. Our memories are not dependent on having physical reminders. Love more, keep less. I give myself such very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. I've said from this chancel before that I am a dragon in human disguise. I love to surround myself with pretty things, shiny things, colorful things. And when I find something I particularly love, I hold on to it and hold on hard. Hold on for dear life. So I understand, I truly understand the desire to hold on to dear life. But I very much hope that as my own death draws near, I will remember that what I want to hold on to is the pretty, the shiny, the colorful, the happy, the warm, the joyful, the loving. Far too many people hold on to life not to suck every last pleasure from it, but simply to beat death at any and all cost. So let's talk about that cost for just a minute. A hospital professional told me that when averaged out, Americans accrue nearly 50% of their lifetime medical expenses due to hospitalizations and ICU stays in the last 6 months of life. People looking to cling to life undergo all kinds of medical interventions that will add very little more time to their lives and often keep them in the hospital for what little time they do gain. I used to blame that situation on doctors and their towering egos, but that same hospital professional has opened my eyes on that front. Doctors are usually prone to be fairly realistic about the possible gains of treatment. It is patients and their families who tend to hear only what they choose to hear. If a pulmonologist says a treatment can ease the patient's breathing, that is heard as an offered cure, while the patient is actually dying of kidney failure. My aforementioned hospital professional is, in truth, my very best friend in the whole wide world, the fabulous and talented Reverend Carrie Fruce. Many of you will have heard her speak about her work as a hospital chaplain as a visiting minister here in this church. She once shared with me a case in which a patient died 5 times in the course of an hour and a half. Each time the man coded, his wife would insist that he be resuscitated. Now, when medical staff arrive with a crash cart, the first step is to hustle any visitors out of the room. After the 4th time they restarted this man's heart, the medical staff conferred and agreed they would keep the wife in the room the next time, because there was sure to be a next time very shortly. She was allowed to witness how violent a resuscitation really is, and then she allowed the madness to stop. My husband was placed in a difficult position of making end-of-life decisions on behalf of his paternal grandmother, Mary, several years ago. She had an aneurysm in her sleep, and her oldest son, my father-in-law, was her legal next of kin. But he lives down in Louisiana. Decisions needed to be made while he was frantically driving up, and he told Darren to do what he thought was best. Darren said that even as a layperson, he could look at the scans and see the damage to the right side of her brain. He told the doctor to just make her as comfortable as possible. He told me later that the doctor seemed relieved. Few of us understand ahead of time that once artificial life support is started, it's not easy to simply stop it. So this is my second recommendation in regards to restoring balance to our relationship with death. While you are healthy, make thoughtful choices about which medical interventions you want and which you don't if you should become ill. Make sure that you have legal protections in place and that your legal representatives know your wishes. Talk openly about how you want to live your last days. Don't wait until that time is upon you, because you and your loved ones might not be thinking clearly in the midst of a crisis. Have conversations as a family about what adds value to life instead of just hours. For many folk, I suspect the desire to push back death has a theological implication. We as Unitarian Universalists are less burdened by the fear of what eternity we have purchased with our earthly deeds. I think that we have a perspective that can help guide others in a healthier understanding of death and dying. And that brings me to my final and third recommendation of how we heal our relationship with death. This is the time I would like you to take out your devices and tap in that URL in the order of service. Now, this is either going to be a highly successful experiment or a wholly hot mess that we'll never try again. But I'd like you to watch that video that comes up. If your neighbor doesn't have a device, please share. It might take a moment to load. And the sound might get a little confusing, but hopefully everybody will be able to get the gist of it. I'll be patient until everyone can finish. Right under the title of the sermon is the link. As I said, it was either going to work or not. Yeah. Yeah. Watch it when you get a chance at home, if you haven't gotten it by now. And just like in grade school, when you're finished, please look up at teacher so I know we can move on. Though it was printed on the live stream, so. I already got a text from Cindy Nather that she enjoyed it. Thank you. For any of you who were not able to enjoy that, please do take the time at home later. It is a musical extravaganza version of the story of a coffin-building community in New Zealand. And somehow I can so easily see our own beloved Barb Ross singing that lead role. So how fabulous was that? I would encourage each of us to find some way to participate in the celebration of our own death while we are still living. That doesn't mean waiting until you know you only have a few weeks left to choose a reading or two or a hymn for your memorial service. I stop and I think about some of the wonderful crossings out of this life that this congregation has seen. I think of Dave Nicklin and learning to see his life through his grandchildren's eyes and knowing that as wonderful as we knew he was, his family knew so much more. I think of Yvonne Price and her beautiful quilts hanging all over the church. My own loved Alex Nather, who chose a very quiet memorial for herself. And of course, as I said, our beloved Barb Ross and her son's inspired idea to let us share via Facebook our love and memories and goodwill for that family while she was still with us. And that's what I would encourage all of us to think about. Personally, I started planning for my own final parting a very long time ago. In my early 20s, when I was newly converted to paganism, I began having a lot of dreams and visions of dying young and unmourned. My mentor challenged me to meditate on that fear. And when I did, I saw myself as a very old woman in a bedroom all done up in white eyelet lace, in a rocking chair with a blue quilt in my lap that looked like ocean waves. And I could hear my grandchildren playing outside the window as I took my last breath. And while that might sound morbid to some, it was actually a huge comfort to me. And so I started searching through quilt books to find the pattern of that quilt I had seen. Turns out to be called a snail's trail block. And some years later, when social media meant the bad old days of email listservs, I worked with a group of pagan quilters from across the country, a few in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and Canada, who knew that witchy quilters was a thriving demographic. And a group of those women helped me put together that quilt. This quilt. This is my shroud. And all of the quilters who worked on the project knew what it was for and felt honored to be part of it. There's an old quilter's joke that says, "Don't bury me in my best quilt." And this is far from my best work, but it will serve its purpose when the time comes. Until then, it sits around my house and gets used to ward off the chill from time to time. When my small boy, who is nearly 8 now, was about 3 years old, he developed a particular fondness for this quilt. He wouldn't go to sleep without it. More recently, his loyalties have shifted to fuzzy blankets with cartoon characters, and that is as it should be. But for almost a year, I tucked my Beamish boy into bed every night in the quilt that went as my comfort in my final rest. It was very special for me. It warmed my heart to see him curled up and sleeping sweetly, knowing that someday in the far-off future, he would use the same quilt to tuck me in for my final sleep. And this is my wish for all of us, that we may find ways each day to bring pleasant thoughts of our dying into our living. Let us rise now as we are able to join our closing hymn, number 354, We Laugh, We Cry.
We laugh, we cry. We need to feel the song.
I wish you peace. I wish you joy. I wish you love. I wish that you may live brilliantly, and that when your hour comes, you will greet death as an old friend, and that you will walk together out of this world as equals. Blessed be.
Such is the way of the world, you can never know just where to put all your faith and how will it grow. Gonna rise up, burning black holes in dark memories. Gonna rise up, turning mistakes into gold. Hey, before you leave, I do have to say, in the order of service, it's not exactly correct. We did a Flaming Lips song, Do You Realize? It's also a song by Bach that our genius Skip Chula here kind of figured out how to put Prelude in C with the Flaming Lips song. So I wanted to make sure you knew that before you left. So have a wonderful rest of your day.